Hi, friends. I'm so glad we're here together. Thank you so much for joining me. Would you pray with me? Lord, we want to take some seconds now and to just enter into your presence with singing, with hope, with certainty that you are who you say you are. Would you speak into us now through your word that we might live your word in this world? Thank you so much for these blessed people, and I pray your covering over them, even as we meet right now. We ask this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen and amen. Our passages today are taken from Isaiah chapter 51, verses 1 through 3, and Matthew chapter 16. Isaiah 51. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were cut and the quarry from which you were hewn. Look to Abraham your father and to Sarah who gave you birth. When I called him, he was only one man, and I blessed him and made him many. The Lord will surely comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all who are ruined. The Lord will make her deserts like Eden, her wastelands like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her. Thanksgiving and the sound of singing. Talk about the long view. To look toward the future where life will bloom again. And if we ever needed a long view, I think we've entered that period right now where the long view is critically important to all of us when just the day-to-day slogging is so hard. Matthew chapter 16, in our journey with the rebel king, we will look at Leaven looking for signs and the long view. When my husband and I moved to Joliet, Illinois, it was a high unemployment, low income, relatively high crime area. And we had 3 small children, and to sustain living there, we made a lot of significant budget cuts. So one of them, I can honestly 100% certainty tell you, we never, ever, ever, ever ordered pizza out. We either made it ourselves or we maybe splurged on a frozen pizza. So one time, our front door, there was this pounding on the front door, and we went to the door, and there was a man. He was one of our neighbors, and Rich and I had just become friends with him, and he was Hispanic and had just a beautiful heart, and he's holding this box. It looks like a heavy box. And we said, "What's up?" He said, "Oh, I brought you something. I brought you something. These are," and he worked for a pizza place. And the dough he had in the boxes was not quite expired, but they weren't allowed to actually bake with it. He said, "It's all perfectly good. And you can make bread, you can make pizza, you can make biscuits, you can make all sorts of things with this dough." Well, we were ecstatic. And so we lugged this stuff in, and we right away made a couple of pizzas, and the kids were thrilled. And we had a spare refrigerator out in our garage. And so because there was so much dough and you couldn't really freeze it, I stuck it back in our spare fridge. Well, I forgot about it in our crazy busy wild. We have 3 small children are involved in inner city ministry life. I came back to the garage days later, and I noticed that the door of the refrigerator was open. So I go back to the house door, and I screamed at our kids, "Who left the refrigerator door open?" And then I tried to close the refrigerator door. It wouldn't close. Guess why? I opened it up, and there are there, all of those pizza balls had just exploded. They had just exponentially filled the refrigerator and blown the door open. Talk about the power of leaven. No wonder Jesus says you got to watch out for the leaven. Well, in Matthew chapter 16, it opens with the Pharisees and the Sadducees coming to Jesus and saying, you know what? I mean, one more sign. Can you just give us a sign that you really are who you say you are? And Jesus is like, he's got to be going, whoa, wait a minute. I've healed countless people, raised the dead from their beds, walked on water, baked thousands of breads. I forgive sins. The hungry are fed, and you're going to put a price on my head. Your sign will be, watch me rise from the dead. And I think we are people who constantly are looking for one more sign. Do you do that? You know, if you just really are, I mean, if you really are, can you please? Or if this is right, would you please? Or, and I am guilty, or no, not guilty, but it is not uncommon that I ask God to just confirm a particular move or an action or a something that I need to be doing, or to make certain that I'm on the right path. Could you give me some kind of a sign? But if that becomes the reason we do or do not believe in Jesus, this is problematic, particularly when we look at everything that Jesus has done throughout his itineracy, right? Well, Jesus says, look at all the sign around you. You can read the weather. You look at the sky in the morning, you say red sky at morning, sailors take warning. You look at the sky at night and say red sky at night, sailors delight. But you can't read what's happening in front of you through me. Things that have never, ever happened before in the history of humanity. When Jesus tucked away with the disciples after that, they're all hunkered down in their boat going, oh man, we forgot bread. We didn't bring bread. They're all fidgety. And Jesus says, be on your guard against the leaven of the Pharisees. And the disciples go, oh, he's upset because we forgot bread. And Jesus said, no, it is not about the bread. It's about the leaven. And in those days, leaven was considered in Judaism to represent like evil influence or false teaching. And I know that we've also had Jesus say the kingdom of heaven is like yeast, where it just grows and grows and grows and grows with goodness. On the other hand, beware of the leaven of evil teaching, of control, of falsehood. And I think about the Pharisees and the toxic legalism that we see there, and the judgmentalism and the double standard. It's okay for you, but not for me, or it's okay for me, but not for you. And it seems to me that this sort of leaven leads us to this place of a loss of humanity, where we fail to see the humanity in other people. And that leads to a loss of heart. Or I wonder if it's the opposite. We start with a loss of heart because we just have never expected that we are so loved. And then that leads to a loss of ability to see other people as human beings. And instead, we become legalistic and judgmental with our double standards. I wonder about that. And I think when I look at my own life, I know that I see this in myself. And I told you last week, I would much rather look at the scriptures and read them for you than to apply them to me. And yet I know that all of these elements become toxic in me. No wonder the refrigerator door blew off, because when yeast expands and expands and expands, it's a gas. It really is noxious, and it will blow up. So we are admonished by Jesus to be on our guard against the leaven of the Pharisees, against the judgmentalism, not against theirs, but against ours. And when we're aware of ours, we're able to love other people in the midst of theirs. And then we become people who do not others. We don't other others, but instead we try to learn how their behavior makes sense, right? Father John Powell in Happiness is an Inside Job said, everyone makes complete psychological sense. So if we start with that loss of heart and then move through the loss of humanity and into the judgmentalism and the compartmentalization and the toxic expectations, we begin to understand everything makes sense. So be on your guard against the leaven. And finally, Jesus asks us to take the long view. In this chapter in Matthew, chapter 16, it is a turning point in the Gospels because from here on out, it's sort of downhill or uphill because they're going to Jerusalem. And this trip will end in a cross. But for us to take the long view, we have to understand this process. And so, first of all, when Jesus said, that's not about the leaven, he said, remember the loaves. Don't you remember? Don't you remember all the bread we made? Don't you remember that we fed 4,000 men, not counting women and children? Don't you remember that we fed 5,000 men and not counting women and children? And don't you remember that we had leftovers? Don't you remember? And so one of the ways we take the long view, knowing that this road leads to the cross, is we take the long view by remembering the loaves. Those places where someone shows up at the door with the balls of pizza dough. Those places where things happen that you cannot explain except by the kindness of God. Remember the loaves? I would love to hear about the loaves in your life. We remember the loaves. And then Jesus says, so, hey, what are other people saying about me? Who do they say I am? And Peter says, well, some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptizer, come back from the dead. That'd be tricky because he was beheaded. Or maybe you're Jeremiah. And Jesus goes, oh, yeah, but who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Son of the living God. You're the Son of the living God. And I think this is our ultimate viewfinder when what we believe about Jesus and who he is determines how we live every single day, how we act in this world. It is the viewfinder to help us take this long view at our world, especially if it involves a cross. This is where Jesus says, if you're going to try and save your life, you're going to lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you are going to save it. And I think if we only realize that death always comes before a resurrection, it would make our everyday life so much easier. And we would hold our belongings so much looser. Death is inevitable. And throughout these, even just this year, we've been bombarded by images of death. But the reality, the very real presence of death in our personal lives and in our country and in our world. Death is inevitable, but Jesus says the powers of death will not overcome us. I will build my church. And we don't know what the church is going to look like down the road. Everything has changed. But we do know this, that death comes before resurrection. It has to, or there is no resurrection. So we fight the right fight. We don't let the leaven poison us. We get over ourselves and we dare to really live. I met a man this week. His name was Father Maximilian Kolbe. He was a Franciscan monk during World War II. He was arrested from his monastery and ultimately ended up in Auschwitz, where he continued to function as a priest to all of the prisoners there. Anyone that he could be around, he prayed for them and he helped them worship and he counseled them and consoled them and invited them into hope, into the long view. And because he was a priest, he was subjected to violent harassment, to lashings and to beatings. And one time, a prisoner actually escaped Auschwitz, and the commander of the camp decided that 10 people must pay for the one person who escaped. And they selected 10 prisoners, 10 male prisoners, and were going to stick them all in a cell and starve them to death. And one of the men, Father Kolbe, is standing nearby, and one of the men says, "But my wife, my children." And Father Kolbe said, I'll go in his place. A janitor who reported later on what he'd witnessed in Father Kolbe's presence was that every time he went into that prison cell, Father Kolbe was standing amongst those starving, dying prisoners, leading them in worship, praying for them, consoling them, comforting them, loving them, helping them transition to the long view. There will be joy and gladness one day. There will be joy and gladness. He was the last one standing. All the other 9 died before him after 2 weeks of starvation and without liquid or food. And finally, the camp commander decided he just needed to be done with this whole process, and determined that Father Kolbe would be killed by lethal injection. When they brought in the needle and the syringe, the story goes that Father Kolbe lifted his arm to receive the injection and that he died with the long view that heaven's coming. Without death, there is no resurrection. Who do you say I am? This will help us know how to live today and tomorrow. And to know that with every death, big or little, comes a resurrection. Joy and gladness will be found in her. Thanksgiving and the sound of a melody. May it be so. May it be so. Would you pray with me? Dear God, I pray that you would help us beware of our own leaven, beware of our own toxicity, and would you help us be deeply aware of who you are, so that we might live out of your identity in us. Thank you that you promised us the long view, that with death comes resurrection. We trust you and we thank you, and we pledge to watch for resurrection. In your name we pray. Amen. Would you join me in the benediction? May we, the people of God, go forth this day into our daily lives, releasing all that we hold dear, that we might become Christ in this world. that we might live the resurrection. Amen and amen.